Hello, everybody. It is Friday, and that means it's Sales Chats time. Hi, I'm Eric, and this is John with me.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a beautiful sunny day here in San Diego. Hope it's a great day wherever you are.
You bet, you bet. And we're delighted today to have Shawn Sandy with us. Shawn is the founder and CRO of the Selling Agency, so we're going to be talking sales like we always do here.
Yay.
And she's building selling organizations, revenue engines fueled by sales strategy. But the real hook here today is we're going to be talking and wrapping the content back to SMBs, small to medium-sized businesses. You know, Shawn has also served as an executive with Regis and OfficeMax, so she knows this customer set really well. Shawn, thank you for joining us. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, let's just start off easy and just tell us a little bit about why is selling in the SMB space different?
Well, you know, a lot of what I was seeing when I was building the selling agency was that you kind of don't have any options for tools and resources in that space. It's I knew that second stage businesses needed some help. You know, it's very expensive to go and hire a sales director if you don't have a sales program, and then the return on investment and learning curve there is very large. And then to hire a marketing firm to put your stuff out there is also very expensive. And, you know, the SMB is all about cash flow. So I knew there had to be something that we could do to help build strategy, implement, execute, and build speed to revenue resources quicker, faster, better, leaner, meaner, greener. And having had a background in really specifically selling to small, mid-sized businesses, I knew how to get that done. So that's how I built the selling agency. I knew that there needed to be a resource for people to be able to, you know, build a sales program, and we sort of step in as a fractional sales director to help get that started and up and running. Because if you're a small business, you're usually a technician or an artist or someone who has been out there doing that, using the skills you've learned, and then you jump off and start your own business because you have the expertise, the talent, and the desire. And there comes a point where all of a sudden you hit a wall. You've got slow revenue, stalled growth, and shrinking margins. And for most small, mid-sized businesses, that at that point they say, hey, I need to hire a salesperson. And without the structure, means, methods, and support of a strong sales program, within 3 to 4 months, I guarantee you that salesperson will burn out. It's a tough road to hoe, and so that's usually where we step in. And so the mindset and the structure of a small, mid-sized business is different than enterprise-sized businesses. I've come from enterprise-sized business, and you know the sales and marketing tools and the collateral materials and the pipeline, all that stuff is the infrastructure is built there for you, and small businesses don't have that.
That's so true, and it's a perfect segue into kind of the first question that we're going to also put out on Twitter, and that's really, you know, where in this case we're talking oftentimes about the owner who's like a player coach, but really, you know, the salesperson is going to be wearing many hats throughout the buy cycle, and you know, what role is really undervalued, but incredibly important there?
Well, it's funny because it used to be salespeople, maybe if you had a product or service where you weren't handing it off, you used to, after the sale, jump in and then sort of be the captain and the project manager. Now, in order to sell to that small business, you've actually got to prove that. You've got to demonstrate that you will and can be the project manager, the team captain to pull together resources before the sale. You actually have to bring the resources to them and show how you're going to climb into their business and lead them through the execution and manage the change to be able to get it done. I think that the average number of employees in the small business is 6. So, and even if you're a small, mid-sized business with 20 to 30 or 40 or 50 employees, in the administrative roles, there still might be only 6 people. So it's not like you have a marketing department to be able to put together collateral materials, or you've got an operations director to be able to, you know, manage how this piece of code works. But you don't have that. You don't have that luxury. So as a salesperson, I need to be able to help manage change, and that is a huge part of selling to a small business owner. They know they need it. If they know they need your product or service, what their consideration and what an obstacle to the sale might be is, how am I going to implement it? How can we manage change? How do I get, you know, Susan to talk to Bill when I'm out trying to sell to John? It's right. Really, you have to kind of understand the reality of the small business owner there.
Yeah.
So there's a big challenge inherent in all of that, obviously, because the salesperson has to wear many hats. They've got to get involved a lot in the sale. How do they ensure then that they don't get bogged down in a sale? Because if you're in a small to medium business segment, you've got to sell a lot of deals really often to be profitable. So how does a salesperson, how do they overcome that challenge where they get sucked into a deal and they never get out, they get into implementation, all of that stuff? Yeah, exactly.
You like kind of climb out of the cage. Well, it's actually part two of the characteristics of successful next generation salespeople, and that we're sort of shifting from the consultative sale to the collaborative sale. And by collaborative, I mean internal collaboration within your customer, and then external collaboration in acting as that team captain or project manager. You've got to bring resources and be able to have trusted resources that you can help get things done. A way to build trust and credibility is to say, hey, John, Mr. Customer, you've been working with him, you've built rapport and trust, but he's still trying to figure out that piece of how he's going to implement and execute. That collaboration piece, that trust can be built where you say, let me bring in Susan. She is our production manager. Susan's going to walk through what this looks like to get you onboarded, where your files will live. You want him to meet Susan so that you're not necessarily bogged down in all of it, but you've got other resources, and you're not also single-threaded within your own organization or theirs. You're sharing resources. You're being that collaborative person to show them how it can get done. So bring in resources, bring in your team members. Another sneaky thing you're doing there, too, is you're vetting objections, and you're also seeing if there's other people who are informal pieces or informal parties to their buying committee.
So how do you kind of, I think these two threads run really similarly together. You talked about kind of the undervalued piece of being a project manager essentially for your own organization, and then bringing a lot of, essentially your own employees into the buy cycle as you go. It seems to me like that is, it just screams management and orchestration. Does it not?
Oh, it does. It does. In fact, I like to say, the big reason I'm talking about this shift is because I've seen so many sales organizations really struggle with hiring salespeople now. And the characteristics that used to be prized for a great salesperson, some of them are not so great now. The whole doesn't play well with others, it just doesn't work. So you've got to be that collaborative person. The customer journey is 22% longer than what it was just 5 years ago. So what that tells me is you've got to be someone who can nurture those sales and bring in more people and expose them to your culture and build trust and credibility that way. They definitely go hand in hand. Closing business now looks a lot less like an arm wrestling match where you have a winner and you have a loser, and it's more like a well-orchestrated. It's more like a symphony where everyone makes beautiful music together. When you get all the resources, all the instruments, all the tools, everyone on the same page, it's win-win-win.
Yeah. So in essence, then, when the salesperson gets involved, as you said, they need to be a manager. They need to be a broker of capabilities, and they obviously have to have that confidence in their own people to be able to let go, right, and to be able to trust other people to execute part of this journey. And that's something, as you know, that some salespeople struggle with. So how do they overcome this issue of trusting and brokering in capabilities and trusting their own organization?
Well, there's two ways to look at that. I like to say there's one sale that probably most every single salesperson misses and does not make, and that's the internal sale. You've got to sell the people in your organization. You've got to sell those operations and production managers or your developers. You've got to sell those people on what you're doing. And you as a salesperson own that, as well as your organization in the culture that they foster. If you've got a culture of a selling organization where everyone is on board, everyone works to recognize customer opportunities and meet the objectives of the organization, then what you do is you create behaviors and you implement and say these are the successful behaviors of our culture of a selling organization. So you've got to have it from the top and be embrace that as a cultural organization of selling, as well as a salesperson. You have to own that too. Office Max, Regis, those are very big examples. Those are big corporations of companies where, we had all these different silos, all these different moving parts. Everyone's got their job. Everyone has their own tasks that they're supposed to do. You don't necessarily care about what my objectives are. I don't know about your objectives. I don't know all the other stuff on your plate. You've got to be able to be empathetic and build trust with your internal sponsors so that you can come to the customer as one functioning unit with, many voices, one message, and be able to bring, build advocates that way too.
And that's a great lead in to kind of our second Twitter question, which is really around, we hear all the time about trust in sales. In fact, last week's episode, that was kind of the #1 buying criteria, and probably since the beginning of time. But, why is relationship selling so very powerful?
Well, let me ask you a question. I thought about this one, and I had a big, long answer, and then I had an epiphany, and I said, have you ever had a relationship?
I love the practical.
Yeah, epiphanies are our favorites.
That's right.
I can be pragmatic. So, have you ever had a relationship with someone you don't trust?
Yes.
It's a surface relationship, and the one thing you never do is you never give them anything that's important to you. Right. You never give them your trust. You never give them your money. You never give them your reputation. You never give them your respect or your resources. So if you don't build a personal relationship with someone based on trust, then they will never give you what is important to them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And again, it goes back to what you're talking about a few moments ago. I mean, there's building trust with the customer, right, your buyer, but there's also building trust internally with your organization, because as we know, I mean, buyers don't always initially trust their salespeople. People in the organization don't always trust their salespeople either. So I love this idea of this two-way piece about how you have to sell and build trust internally and sell and build trust externally too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like that yin and yang graphic, if you will, where you have both pieces working effectively together. One of the things that I was really curious about when you were kind of detailing out, this essentially a playbook, if you will. I'm curious how you're going into organizations as chief revenue officer of the selling agency, where you have a client engagement, and you're more often than not probably starting with the owner, right? And in the organizations the size we're talking about, and then how you go about kind of teaching or coaching towards these realities that you're talking about, kind of that they then can take it upon themselves to pull in, Joe, the developer, who's actually going to be working with the customer, but during the buy cycle, and making Joe effective and teaching those skills. Give us some of, like, maybe even not a role play necessarily, but like give us a feel and a flavor for how you do that, Shawn.
Well, there's my two favorite E's. We talked about my favorite F word earlier, which was Friday.
That got edited out.
Yeah, that wasn't when we were live, so you can explain it if you want, but you don't have to.
My two favorite E words are empathy and then emotional intelligence. Business owners, EQ, yes.
Never
business owners in particular, you really can connect with them well if they know that you understand what it's like to be in their shoes. If you know and understand the gritty, not pretty reality of their everyday situation. I was coaching a group on this the other day, and we were talking about their target audience, which is HR directors, and they were putting out ebooks. And I said, what do you want to bet that an HR director sits at their desk and eats their lunch while they're staring at stacks of applications or policy that needs to be written? How do you think they're going to use an ebook that's 37 pages? Is that really relevant to their reality? So, the discussion we had there was breaking things down into bite-sized pieces that were applicable and usable that very day. So whenever I do go and meet with those business owners, I usually talk about the reality. What does it look like? What time do you get there in the morning? What time do you wake up? What time do you go to bed? And the reality of the situation is, as far as a salesperson who has the resources and could be that sales Sherpa to sort of guide them up the mountain, they're in their business. They're working in their business. They're working on, they've got cash flow and payroll and all these really critical, important things. Whether they have departmental heads to take care of or not, that's still the buck stops with them. They're the bottom line. So being able to understand what their reality is and speak to how you can help improve their reality, how you can bring them a solution that doesn't blow their cash flow or their budgets, and how you can implement and manage change is the way we start the conversation. Because if you just say, here's my solution, I know it will work, and you're going to end up with, you know, X amount of return on investment, great. But the only thing they're thinking about is, oh, crap, I have another thing to do. How am I going to do this? So the reality and the empathy and understanding what it means to them to take on a new project, a new investment, they may not know they need it. They may don't know that they need it. They don't know how they're going to do it.
Which raises a really interesting question, and something that I've seen over the last number of years is that salespeople nowadays, and particularly in small to business, but I think across sales, is you really need business acumen today. You need to understand the business, not just the business of your buyer, but just the business of business.
Yeah.
I mean, no longer can you just have this superficial view. I mean, like you said, you got to understand bottom line just as much as top line. Otherwise, you can't empathize with small business owners, right?
Oh, absolutely. And a huge mistake that salespeople make is we don't speak in the value currency of who we're sitting across from. When I have companies that do have a sales team and do have a sales force give me a sample pitch, you know, we set up a full scenario. I am this person. I am this buyer from XYZ company. You know, you've got me here. Let's sit down and have a sales call. Well, inevitably, you know, they've customize the presentation by putting my name, maybe my logo on it, but it's the same information organized the same way. You know, what's important to a CEO or a board chair is not the same thing that's important to a director or a user. And sometimes that seems obvious, but you really have to understand the value currency that's driving their decisions. CEOs, they have quickly changing priorities, and they're thinking big picture, economy, industry. You know, VPs are thinking competitive forces, you know, KPIs, and, you know, they own a business segment. Directors and users, that's down at granular level. You know, they're the ones who have actually the most to risk because they're the ones implementing change. So their objection is going to be, this is the status quo. I'm happy with the status quo. Don't want to change it. And then you have your small business owner, and to some degree they wear all those hats, and they're going through all those different things. So salespeople, we have to, there goes back to the EQ and the empathy, you have to understand what is the currency of your audience, not just the buyer, but your audience. If you're going to sell something in an organization, you might hit all four of those and then some, like for instance the administrators. Right. You might hit all those folks and have to be able to sell to what they value and speak in their currency.
Yeah, so you're really walking in those people's shoes with each interaction you have. You know, I find that's probably one of the least used parts of account planning, right? Or call planning even, where it's like, okay, let's just get a level set and see, you know, what is this person's title? You know, who do they report to in the organization, right? Like some of the things that we've recently built into Pipeliner to give you a visual view of the org chart, but like it seems so basic and so simple, yet so powerful when you get it right. Yeah. When you say, oh, you know what, this is the controller, and she actually holds the budget in this particular deal. If I know that, I'm going to talk to her in a very specific manner every time we interact.
Yeah, and you know, I have.
We get caught up in always talking about selling and the sales process and the selling process instead of, as you rightly pointed out, instead of looking at it from the buyer's point of view. The relationship, the buyer's reality, the buyer's process.
Yeah, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about me. If I'm the buyer, it's about me. One of the biggest pet peeves I have is when we do those. You know, a roll call sales presentations for the first time, and I see the presentation. It might, like I said, it may have my name on it, may even have, you know, my logo slapped on the cover too, but that's where it ends. That's where anything and everything ends when it comes to me. Everything is about our history. Let me tell you about our history, our features, our capabilities. But wait, it's my name on the cover. Shouldn't this be about me, the buyer? And unfortunately, that doesn't happen all the time. It's something so. It's not small. It's actually really huge, but it's something, like you said, really overlooked. Even so, you know, we talk about buying committees that way, and that you're customizing for the person in the informal buying committees. Somebody on the buying committee that everybody always overlooks is the administrators.
Right.
How many times have you ever gone and you think you closed something, but if your PO system doesn't match up with theirs, or your billing or accounting, Brenda in accounting may sync your deal, and you've never met Brenda in accounting,
right.
and you don't know what's important to Brenda in accounting, but she has a voice in the process of deciding who to use as a vendor.
Yeah, and it can also be very subversive, like especially because if you talk about the roles, typically people in finance roles, they look at one thing and one thing only, and that's the bottom line. Right. And they're very experienced at running those numbers to get to total cost of ownership and what it's actually going to cost the business to outlay to anything. And that's oftentimes where you get back into these conversations, which no salesperson wants to have, where it's just about the numbers, right?
Right.
So it's almost like, okay, well, here's a person that could set off a landmine, but you don't want to step on that landmine. How do you get out of that before you even go into it?
Yeah.
Well, you go back to what Matt said last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's a great point of differentiation if you actually take the time to map everybody who's affected by this purchase and you go and make sure you connect with them. And what a great point of differentiation. But let us move on to our next question. So,
kind of like the flip.
The flip, yeah, exactly. Flip it over. So, personal branding, right? There's a lot of negativity around that from some people who say, "Oh, your personal branding, it's all
it's
just
all about me."
It's back to
not
me,
the buyer,
not the buyer. It's me pushing out, "Hey, look how cool I am." But how can we encourage sales professionals to create a digital footprint that really actually can help their buyer, credential them as a seller, and it be a positive experience, because it is a critical part now. Do you agree?
Yep, I really do. And I would even say that I have said that it's not even an encouragement. It's a responsibility of the salesperson now to have a digital personality, to have a digital footprint. It's like, okay, so we're in NBA playoff time, right? So Memphis Grizzlies, grit and grind. We've got Marc Gasol, our center here. It'd be like Marc Gasol standing at center court, hitting shots or putting up shots all day long. He is negligent in his job if he doesn't do whatever he can to get closer to the hoop. That's his job. So if you're a salesperson and you're not doing whatever it is you can do to bring customers and buyers closer to you, you're actually negligent in your responsibilities and your role as a salesperson.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting too. We talked about trust earlier in the episode, and one of the things that I find all the time nowadays is when I actually don't know who a seller is, or they're a digital ghost, or they have no footprint whatsoever. Yeah. Like that element that would go into trust, like just who this person is.
Right.
Like can I get an image of them, or can I even just get a feel for what they're all about? Like, is just a big question mark now. And so the trust kind of like, it's almost put back a few steps. Yeah. Is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Because, with all the research and everything that buyers do now, and there's people who argue about what it really means to say that buyers are 2/3 way through the buying cycle before they engage sellers. If you don't appear or show up in their search for answers, if you haven't connected with the people in that early 2/3 and influence their decision-making criteria, you cannot influence their decision to buy you. So you have totally blown your opportunity to build trust.
Yeah, it's a bit like Casper the unfriendly digital ghost, right? But back to that point again. I mean, I know there's lots of stats out there about 50%, 65%, 70% through the buying process, and what I always say is, to me, it doesn't really. The statistics don't matter. Right. What matters is that your buyer is further into their process than before. Their buying process has changed. So it really behooves you as a seller to go and understand their process. So, do you encourage people to go talk to your existing customers, your new customers, ask them how they like to buy, how do they use digital and social media during that process?
Absolutely, because where you find one, you will probably find the others. And not having a digital personality and a digital footprint, here's why that works for a buyer, and trust and all the other things we've talked about. Having a digital personality and digital footprint, it's like buyers get the opportunity to try before they buy. They get to know you so they can see what it's like to do business with you. When they look at your profile and your referrals and your recommendations and your body of work, they can build trust without you even knowing they're looking at you, by knowing that you have the expertise, you have the connections, you have the resources, you're a thought leader if you're putting information out there. It really is a try before you buy. You want them to try you before you buy you.
Well, and you also, kind of continuing that thread outward, I think this is also a really underserved piece where, social footprints and your digital identities are some of the greatest places to establish a reference base. And exactly what you're kind of alluding to, which is, hey, I've done this before, and I can help guide you in the way that I've guided other people. And that actually is a really strong, it's a huge correlation with trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, you used the word Sherpa, right? Like, the idea of a Sherpa that's never done a journey before would not inspire great trust. A Sherpa, though, who has gone up the mountain, down the mountain, many times with groups like you, or others in the pack like you, all of a sudden it's like, well, I got to trust this guy with my life.
Right. Well, and it's really critical too with those small business and SMBs, because they're head down, nose down in their business. They're a really hard target. It's a movie. It's like trying to pin Jello to a wall to get sometimes to a small business owner, because they're there every day making the donuts. You remember the Dunkin' Donuts commercial? Got to make the donuts. And they don't often have the opportunity to get outside of their business and network with colleagues and understand the resources and the new technologies and stuff like that that are helping other business in order to be able to scale and grow. So in small business, kind of the two most pressing priorities to address are cash flow and scalability and growth. So if they're not able to go out and find those resources on their own, you have got to be the Sherpa to be able to bring them up the mountain. You're acclimated. You've done it before. You've brought people back down alive. You've got all these great stories to tell that you want them to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're almost, again, where does the time go with these chats?
We're almost at the top of the mountain already.
And we got to come down quick, but we have to make sure that the air is not too thin. Anyhow, so what we always love to end with at sales chats is really what we call our supercharged sales tip of the day. And that is really where we're talking about a practical daily secret to getting in the right mindset for success. And you already gave us a sneak preview talking about where with consulting clients you're starting with how do you start your day. So let's hear your secret, for the audience, of how you start yours.
Okay. This is I think about this every day and all day. And it's really, I write about it, I blog about it. You hear me talk a lot about the status quo. I've never had a competitor with any other name than the status quo. And no one could touch me on printing or office. My job in sales was to move the status quo. And so I think about that when I get up. But what I think about personally for the status quo, and this is a life mindset, like you said. You can apply this to sales, to your job, to customers. But when I get up every day, I think, I'll put it in terms of you and your status quo is temporary. Your status quo is temporary and only defined by the constraints that you accept for yourself. So if you want to change something, you can. Because if you want to reset the button on your status quo, you can. You make a plan and you do the hard stuff. Not like hard stuff, but like the hard stuff.
Oh yeah, that's at the end of the day, right?
That's right.
That's how you finish the day.
It is Friday after all.
That's what we did.
But I love that, because one of the things I think, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox now about the culture that we live in now, but I do believe that there is a bit of a shortcut culture, easy culture. So when you say, I mean, you change yourself, you change the status quo, starts with you, it's hard work, and it often boils down to hard work.
Well, yeah, the answer isn't, you don't want to stop yourself. It's not, who's going to stop me? It's not going to be me.
Right. Perfect. Well, what a great way to finish.
Exactly. Shawn, it's been a great episode. Thank you so much for joining us and delivering your insights around empathy, emotional intelligence, and the status quo.
Yeah.
We love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Good
Well,
stuff.
thank you. Y'all do great work, and from a salesperson and someone who is building and coaching sales teams, having resources, you being the Sherpa for sales and sales systems and bringing sales resources and stuff together, it's fantastic. It really is. It makes a difference, and great salespeople should be out there eating this stuff up.
We love it.
We'll take
it.
Yeah, we'll take it. Thank you very much for that endorsement, and have a great rest of the weekend.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. You too.
Thanks much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.